Long ago, two old countries faced each other across a wide river. In the north, the land was dark and rich, and the forges burned all night. Men and women worked with iron and stone. They made blades and plows. They made hinges and hope. They called their country the Iron Marches. In the south, the land was bright and green, and the river moved like a long blue road. People grew grain and fruit. They kept orchards. They healed the sick and traded along the water. They called their country the Riverlands. Between these two lands stood a red bridge of stone. People called it the Red Span. It joined the banks like a promise. It also divided them like a line. For 30 years there was war. Sometimes it was loud and close. Sometimes it was quiet and far. Even when no city burned, ash fell from the sky. People named it the Ember War because the fire never truly died. In the Iron Marches, a boy grew up with the sound of hammers in his ears. His name was Cale Thorne. His father made horseshoes. His mother kept a small garden behind their house and showed him the first shoot of every spring. When he was 12, soldiers marched through town and asked for strong boys. Cale stepped forward because he thought strength was the same as goodness. He learned drills. He learned maps. He learned that orders were like roads. You followed them to arrive at the end someone else had chosen for you. In the Riverlands, a girl grew up with the sound of water and soft voices. Her name was Elara Wynn. Her father was a general. Her mother was a midwife who believed hands were for saving. Elara learned how to grind herbs into paste. She learned how to wrap a bandage without waste. She learned to write what she saw in a clear hand, so memory would have a home. When she was 15, a fever ran through a riverside village. Elara helped carry water. She sat with the old. She saw how fear could be loud and hope could be quiet. Both children grew into the war like trees grow into wind. The war did not ask if they were ready. It only asked if they would stand. Cale rose to captain by 22. He did not rise by shouting. He rose by doing. He walked the line at night and checked knots. He held a cup for a boy who could not hold it himself after a fall. He kept a small book in his pocket where he wrote one true thing each day. Some days the truth was about the sky. Some days it was about himself. He did not show the book to anyone. Elara became a healer and a scribe. She followed the river army in a wagon with shelves of jars. She wrote reports for her father, General Corin Wynn, even when he was far away. She did not lie in those reports, not even to please him. She had learned that lies are like cracks in a bowl. One day the bowl breaks, and then the truth spills everywhere and cannot be saved. When she had time, she read by candlelight. She liked histories of bridges and notes about how people once solved fights without swords. In the 4th week of spring, both armies turned toward the same square in the map. It was a town called Dawnmere. It sat on the salt road, which carried iron to the sea and grain to the hills. The Red Span lay just beyond it. If the Iron Marches held Dawnmere, they could press to the bridge. If the Riverlands held it, they could hold the north at the water. Scouts ran like thin shadows. Messengers drove their horses hard. Smoke rose from cook fires in 2 camps, one on each side of the plain. At first light, the Iron Marches moved. Cale's banner rode at the front with a line of infantry behind it. The order was simple. Take the north gate, clear the square, push to the bridge. Simple orders make a man feel clean, even when the work is not. Cale lifted his hand. His men halted. He lowered it. They moved. Dawnmere had low houses and a bell tower that had never known war until that day. The bell rang and rang. People ran. They carried what they could, which was never much. Smoke crawled over rooftops. The air tasted like a match held too long. Cale moved the way he had been taught. He kept his breath steady. He watched the edges of his view. He counted the steps to the square. Then a sound rose up that did not belong to battle. It was a steady voice cutting through the panic. Hands on the rope. Do not run. Eyes on me. Cale looked toward the sound. In the square, a young woman stood with 6 small children pressed against her legs. Behind them, a wall burned at the edges. She had placed a rope in their hands to keep them together like a small boat. Her hair was the color of dark leaves. Her face was very calm. She looked at Cale as if she had been told to look for him in a dream. Cale raised his hand. "Hold," he said. His men stopped. "Shields left," he said next. "Bucket line." "Captain," said Lieutenant Bran. Bran had a hard voice because he thought hardness made him real. "We clear a path for the children," Cale said. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. His men moved. They kicked a barrel into the fire to spill water. They made a narrow door between heat and smoke. The line of children walked through, small hands on the rope, eyes on the woman. The last child stumbled. Cale caught him and set him back on his feet. The air on the clear street felt like the first drink of a long day. Cale turned to the woman. "Name," he said. "Elara Wynn," she said. "Healer, you are coming with us," Cale said. "As a prisoner?" she asked. "As proof," he said. "As proof that this can stop." She could have refused. She could have run. She looked at the children who were now with a shopkeeper who knew how to count to 6 and keep 6 together. She looked back at Cale and nodded once. She walked with him toward the north gate. In the iron camp, Elara was placed under a canvas canopy near the infirmary. Cale told the guards she was a scribe. It was almost true. She bound a cracked knuckle and a split scalp and 2 scrapes that would scar only if left alone. She asked for clean water and a pot to boil more. Soldiers watched her with eyes made tired by hurt. Their faces changed as she worked, as if they had remembered something that the war had taken from them for a while. Lieutenant Bran stood with his arms folded. He was older than Cale by 5 years, and thought the extra years made him wise. "We take prisoners," he said later. "We do not adopt them. We took a healer," Cale said. "We have wounded. Lord Havar asked for victories, not virtues," Bran said. He did not say it loud, but he said it like a man would say the law. That night Elara tried the tent flap. Cale stood outside. He had known she would try because he would have tried. "If you run," he said, "Bran will have what he wants. He will say you forced his hand. He will make your blood a banner." "I have a reason to try," she said. "Then try in the morning," he said, and his voice was low and tired. "When I can run with you if I must." Elara studied him. Soldiers were easier when they were simple. This one was not simple. "You spared children," she said. "What does that make you?" "Tired," he said. "Tired of counting what I can live with." Before sleep, Elara traced a small blessing on her wrist. It was a sign the Riverlands used. It meant, "May the water remember me." Cale pretended not to see. Later he drew the same mark on his palm in ash. He did not know if it would help. He only knew it felt like a door, and he had spent too long inside one room. At dawn, Lord Havar came with new banners and old rage. He walked through the camp like a man who believed the ground was grateful to feel his boots. He stood before Cale and looked past him to Elara as if she were a tool set on a table. "Captain Thorn," Havar said, "we take the red span by sundown, and the river woman, hang her on the gate at first light. Let their army see what we do to thieves of our daylight." The camp went very still. Bran's mouth curved the way a mouth curves when duty and appetite smell the same. "We win more with her alive," Cale said. His voice did not shake. "We can trade, we can talk." "You forget yourself," Havar said. "No," Cale said. "I remember them." He meant the children. He did not say the word children because men like Havar heard some words and pretended they had never been spoken. Havar leaned close. "You will obey," he said, "or I will find a captain who will." He walked away, satisfied by the sound of his own threat. Power often enjoys the echo of itself. Cale's hands shook only after Havar was gone. He set them on the table until they stopped. That night, when the camp slept, a dark shape slipped into the tent where Elara lay on a mat, her hands folded under her cheek like a child. A knife glinted once in the starlight that found a hole in the canvas. Cale moved, fast and low. He caught the wrist, turned it, and the knife fell. The shape ran. Cale knew that run. It was Bran's. He went to Elara and touched her shoulder. She woke without a start. Some people wake like a door flies open. She woke like a lamp is lit. "We leave," he said. "Now you will be called a traitor," she said. "Then let me betray the right thing," he said. They cut the ties at the back of the tent and moved between the cook fires. Horses breathed in the dark. Cale chose 2 that could be trusted and said a quiet word into each ear. He had learned that horses understood quiet words better than men did. They rode north and then east, not toward the road, but toward a canal that carried old water through the bones of older stone. It was called the Night Canal because the arches above it were broken, and the moon often showed through, and the sound of hooves there carried like voices in a chapel. They spoke little. When they did, their words were plain. If we reach the red span by dawn, Ilara said, we can stop both armies. There is powder under the eastern buttress. If the bridge falls, no side can cross. It will give 1 day. 1 day can be enough for a man with a heavy sword to put it down. 1 day can be enough for a general to see his daughter alive and choose to hold his men. Bravery looks like treason in daylight, Kale said. Then we act at dawn, Ilara said. They rested once in a ruined chapel open to the sky. The candles in the wall were all cold. Ivy laid its green hands on the stone. A star moved across a gap where the roof had once been. Why did you stand in the square? Kale asked. Most people run when fire runs. When fire runs, someone has to stand, Ilara said. If no one stands, it eats the street and the next street. In time, it eats the whole town. I do not like being eaten. You stood between my blade and your enemy, he said. I stood between your orders and children, she said. There is a difference. Kale let out a short laugh. It was the first honest laugh he had made in months. It felt like a gate opened somewhere inside his ribs. They rode on. Dawn grew in a thin white line on the horizon. The red span appeared ahead of them, a long red rib across the river. At its feet, powder kegs sat where old masons had once stored sand. Ilara's hands did not shake as she checked the cords. Kale's hands shook a little as he set the fuses. It was not fear. It was the cost of understanding. He understood now that a bridge is not only stone. It is a promise, but some promises must be broken so better ones can be made. A bridge is a promise, Ilara said, as if she could hear him think. Today it must be a pause. Pauses save more lives than charges, Kale said. On the north bank, iron banners rippled like storm clouds. On the south bank, river pennants lifted like leaves. Soldiers from both armies had woken early to fight. Now they saw two small figures on the middle of the span. Bran reached the bridge first with a squad of iron soldiers. He had ridden all night thinking of orders and of glory. He shouted across the stone, "Captain, by Lord Havar's command, stand down and be unmade." Kale stepped forward. "Lower your steel," he said, not loud, but the sound carried because the river liked the shape of his voice. "No one has to die today. Then the river runs with you," Bran said. He drew his sword. They fought. Kale did not fight like a man hungry for blood. He fought like a man removing a thorn. He turned strikes aside. He moved his feet. He did not reply to every cut with a cut. He disarmed Bran with a twist and a shove. Bran went to his knees, breath gone, fury still there. Kale did not finish him. He looked up. Horses came black over the hill. Lord Havar was at their head, face set, eyes like coins hammered too thin. "Thorn," Havar cried. "You would break the span, treason." "Mercy," Kale said. "Mercy is a word men use when they are too weak to win," Havar said. On the south bank, General Corin Wynn raised his hand. He saw his daughter standing on the bridge. His mouth opened on her name. "Ilara, father," she called back. "Hold." Her voice was clear. It rolled across the water like a prayer. Bows lifted on both banks. Fingers pulled strings tight. The air turned thin. Kale lit the fuse. It hissed like a snake who had decided not to bite but to run. Havar lifted a crossbow aimed at Ilara's chest. Kale knocked the bow with his forearm. The bolt went wide and struck stone. Sparks jumped and died. The fuse kissed powder. The red span sighed. It shuddered like a tired animal lying down. It folded the way a book closes at the end of a chapter. Stones fell into the river with heavy final sounds. Spray jumped up bright and cold. For a long breath, all noise was water. When the roar ended, there was wind. Between the armies was a wide space of fast water. No one could cross. No horse could leap. No order could pretend to be a bridge. Bows remained drawn. Then one by one, hands shook. Men and women lowered their aim, because it is hard to shoot when your daughter is on the far bank, and your enemy has just spared your life, and you are tired of being told your tiredness is a sin. Ilara stepped to the broken edge and lifted both hands. "No more today," she said. "Count the living." Her father heard his child. He lowered his sword. On the north bank Cale lowered his. One by one, steel went home to sheath. It made a softer sound than the sound steel makes when it leaves. "Loose!" Havas shouted, but his men did not obey. Command had broken on the same stone as the span. Sheriffs and sergeants moved, not toward the river, but toward the lord who had lost the room. Bran on his knees stared at his empty hands. He whispered something he had heard from Cale on a night when a boy almost lost a finger to a rope, and Cale had said the most important thing in the world sounded very simple. "We go home. That is the job." Hava pulled his horse around and fled along the bank. He rode like a man chased by something he could not see. He was chased by a new world that did not need him. At noon, leaders met on the stones where the bridge had been. Boots were wet. Voices were low. The river made its own speech beside them. General Corin Wynn looked at Cale as a soldier and as a father. He saw the young man who had taken his daughter and then chosen to save her. "You took much from me," the general said, "but today you gave me a tomorrow for my people. I know which debt weighs more." "She gave it," Cale said. "I only carried the fuse." "You carried the choice," Ilara said. She stood between them, not as a prize, not as a plea, but as a person. They signed a truce with names that would be sanded down by time until they were part of a story and not a list. It was not a perfect truce. It was a real one. They placed 2 coins on a broken slab. One coin was iron, one was river silver. It was a promise to rebuild when the water allowed. It was a promise to think before building. It was a promise to ask what a bridge is for before laying the first stone. For a while after that day, Cale and Ilara did not see each other. That is a true thing about war and the end of war. People scatter like birds when the hawk is gone. They remember how to be small and safe. They teach themselves how to sleep again without listening for the order that starts with "at dawn." Cale left the army. He returned to the town where his father had once hammered horseshoes. The forge had been sold. The garden had weeds as tall as a man in places, but the soil still remembered how to feed. He pulled the weeds. He fixed the fence. He found the small book he had carried and wrote on the first page, "I am a man who chose." Then he put the book away and did not look at it for a month, because sometimes truth is a stone in the pocket, and you do not need to touch it to know it is there. Ilara stayed with the river army as a healer. Men do not stop getting hurt when papers are signed. They cut their hands on new beams. They twist ankles on old stairs. They wake in the night from dreams where the wrong sound happens at the wrong time. She walked the lines of tents and listened to breath. She boiled water. She learned the names of people not wearing uniforms because the war had always lived in their houses more than in the field. One evening, some weeks after the fall of the Red Span, Ilara crossed to the northern bank by boat under a white flag. She came with 2 women from the river and a chest of herbs. The iron marches had made a clinic in a stone barn where the hayloft still smelled sweet. Cale was there with sleeves rolled and hands scratched from fence work. He had brought baskets of apples because apples make a room feel like a home and not a waiting place. They saw each other and did not know which were the right first words, so they said the plain words. "Hello," Ilara said. "Hello," Cale said. "How is your hand?" she asked, because she remembered when he had struck the crossbow and the string had cut him. "It stings in the cold," he said. "It reminds me to wear gloves. Sometimes I do not listen." She smiled. "Men do not always listen to hands. They listen to fewer things than they should," he said. They worked side by side that evening. She taught a girl from the iron side how to tie a bandage that would not slip. He showed a boy from the riverside how to lift a beam without twisting his back. They did not talk about love. They did not talk about fate. They talked about how to keep a kettle from blackening on one side if the fire is uneven. They talked about how to make a clean cut on a rope with a dull knife. It was a better kind of talking than the kind people do when they want to sound wise. The next week, Cale took a cart south with timber to mend a dock. Ilara walked up from the river with jars of ointment for sunburn, because men forget that peace also burns. They met where the shore curved, and the wind made the reeds whisper. They talked again. They did not plan these meetings. They did not call them meetings. They did not tell anyone who would put a name on them that would make them feel heavier than they were. They were two people who had fought a long time and found that standing near each other made the ground feel less tilted. Summer grew, markets opened, people stood close again. Boys who had been told to shout learned how to speak softly and be heard. Girls who had been told to hide learned how to step into a room and say what was needed and leave again without being asked where they had learned such a skill. The river ran like it had been waiting to run this way all along. One afternoon, Cale heard that Lord Havre had found men willing to listen to his old words. They were a small band, but small bands can hurt if they are mean in the right way. They planned to burn a grain store near the river to show that the truce was weak. Fire has always been a letter men write when they cannot write a good one. Cale took this news to Sheriff Ada Reed, who had a loud laugh and a cold eye for fools. She had been a sergeant in the Iron Army and had learned that a law is a thing made by hands. It must be held up by hands. She sent riders quietly. She told Cale to keep his head down and his door open. Ilara heard the same rumor from a boatman with a crooked hat and a love of stories. She took it to her father. General Wynne said he would send patrols. Ilara said patrols make a noise that scares away truth. She said she would go to the grain store and sit on the steps with a lantern. A light can be a kind of wall if you hold it steady, she said. Cale found her there at dusk. He did not tell her to leave. He sat beside her. They did not know if the men would come. They knew they did not want each other to be alone if they did. The men came late, like shame. They wore cloth on their faces like a bad idea wears a mask. Cale stood and said the kind of words Sheriff Reed would approve. The truce is the law. The barn is full of bread for children. Go home. One of the men raised a torch. He had Bran's eyes, but he was not Bran. Bran had left the army and gone east. He tended sheep. He woke at night and saw a bridge fall and held his breath until the feeling passed. This was another man. He liked the way fire looks when it climbs. Ilara stood too. She did not speak a fancy speech. She said a plain sentence. I am the general's daughter, she said, and I am a healer. If you burn this, you will starve the children who hurt the same as yours. If you must set fire, set it to the old rules in your own head. The man with the torch laughed because men laugh when words make them see themselves, and they do not like what they see. He took one step. Cale took two. He put his hand on the man's wrist. No, he said. His voice was soft and final. Sheriff Reed stepped from the dock with 3 deputies who had moved like cats. They took the torches. They took the men. They took a breath and did not write a letter in fire that night. After that, fewer men came to Havre's call. Fire had not answered him. Peace sometimes grows like a plant in a crack. It does not look strong until one day you try to pull it and you learn the roots went deeper than you thought. Cale and Ilara did not try to define what they were to each other. They did not rush toward an altar. They walked the long, slow road that begins with 2 people taking the same path because it is easier to talk while walking than while standing still. They learned small things that big words cannot carry. Cale drank tea too hot and made a face. Ilara laughed and told him to wait. Ilara forgot to eat when she was tired. Cale put an apple in her hand without making a speech about care. He did not say the word love. He did not need to. The word walked beside them without stomping its feet to be seen. One evening, Cale returned to the red span. He stood on the northern stone where the bridge had broken and looked at the water. Ilara came up the path. He had not sent for her. She had not promised to come. Still she was there. They stood with shoulders almost touching. The sun pulled long wine colors across the river. I thought the bridge would haunt me, Cale said. It does not. It was a bridge made of old orders, Ilara said. It was time for a new kind. What kind? He asked. The kind that remembers what it is for, she said. To carry people, to make trade, to let friends meet. To let a soldier walk to a healer and say hello without a war needing to be the excuse. He turned to her. Hello, he said like the first time. She turned to him. Hello, she said. They did not kiss there. Some moments belong to quiet rooms. Some belong to open sky. They stood until night drew its cool hand over the water and the first star came out, and the river kept talking the way a river talks when it has put out many fires and is proud of itself in a quiet way. In the months that followed, Cale built with wood and stone. He built fences. He built small bridges for cattle across small streams. He learned how a beam wants to sit and how a nail will tell you if it does not like where you have put it by refusing to go in straight. Elara built with thread and words. She mended skin. She mended stories. She corrected people when they called the fall of the Red Span a loss. She said it was a change. Some things must change so other things can begin. When fall came, the leaves turned the color of old copper. The air smelled like apples and smoke that belonged to good fires that warmed and cooked. Cale and Elara stood at a market stall to buy a blanket because the nights were colder. The woman selling it said, "Are you husband and wife?" She did not say it to press. She said it because people like to put names on things that make them smile. Elara looked at Cale. Cale looked at Elara. Elara said, "We are two people who choose each other." The seller nodded. "That is what a husband and wife is," she said, and wrapped the blanket for them without charging full price because she liked their faces. They carried the blanket between them. It was heavy in a good way. It was woven of wool, and of the day on the bridge, and of the night by the grain barn, and of all the small talks where big words had not been needed. They did not need to say more. The world had learned the shape of their steps beside each other. Winter would come with its own hard lessons. Old men would still say old things in the corner of taverns. Some would listen, some would not. That is the way of winters and of men. But there would be fewer fires in places where fires did not belong. There would be more lamps lit by hands that had learned how to hold a light steady so it could be a kind of wall. This is the story of how a soldier trained to show no mercy saw a young woman stand in front of a fire to shield 6 children, and his sword dropped, and the war began to change. It is the story of how he saved her and took her with him, yes, but also the story of how she saved him by showing him where to set down what he had carried too long. It is the story of a bridge that fell so 2 people could teach 2 countries a new meaning of strength, not the strength to strike, but the strength to spare. Mercy is not a crack in armor. Mercy is a seam. It holds 2 sides together. Some days the seam will be tested. Some days it will stretch. If it is sewn with hands that know why they build, it will not break. And if it does break, there will be hands ready to stitch again. People like Cale, people like Elara, people like the children who once held a rope in a burning square and learned to walk through smoke by watching a calm face and trusting that even in war, one person can stand and another can choose, and between them a path can open where none seem to be.